you need to be able to ask those kind of dumb questions, you know?
I think that's really excellent point. Maybe I'm curious to ask this question because I think that maybe academicians sometimes fail at to maybe make analogy for the complex idea. And that's something I think is not easy skill, you know, the storytelling or how you can, as you mentioned, that you have to understand it in your own way and then deliver to audience. But let me ask you first, how do you think you can taste the audience? Because it's challenging how they can culture interest in this subject.
Mm.
How you can do that?
Yeah, I think to me in general, like I think that like I find, and this, I mean, I feel like I'm repeating myself a million times, but I really think it's about questions. It's about finding the right question. Sort of like it's almost like you're sculpting, you're streamlining and shaping a question in such a way to kind of ring a bell in someone's mind, you know, because I think we all have these questions that we sit with all the time. And then and if you can hear somebody else, whether it's me or anybody, ask that question that you've had that you've never had an answer to, or you didn't even realize you had, then all of a sudden, then you're going to pay attention. Then the audience is going to be with you, and in fact, they will go with you on a long journey to find the answer to that question, as long as they know that your question is their question too. So you know, an example from the in the TV show I did from the clouds episode, you know, we start with this idea, although we never fully explain it, but the idea that, you know, the average cloud or like most clouds weigh more than a blue whale, and you're like, that's crazy. How is that true? How could that possibly be? How could it stay up there in the air, right? And so that's like a question that's like, that feels like a somewhat a universal question, right? That I think that people would want to know the answer to, because it's a little bit strange and unsettling. It's kind of funny. It's sort of a thing that maybe you wondered about when you were a kid, but then sort of put it away. And then, you know, if someone can bring up something, and not necessarily about clouds. I mean, there are a million of these kinds of questions all around us. And you know, all different kinds of stories that I do are about different versions of that. But in a way, it's like if you nail the question right at the beginning, I find it's a lot easier to get people to come along with you, because they're like, yeah, what is the answer to that? I have no idea. You're totally right. You know?
Yeah. I really like this point. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Maybe I'm curious to ask you about the documentary show series about Connected.
Sure.
Why you started? How we get this idea? And when you just starting, what we wanted to do, like a documentary for audience.
Yeah.
How you get this idea?
Yeah, we there's sort of a bunch of ways that I came to the idea. I was approached by a production company, a really wonderful production company based in New York, and they said that they wanted to make a science show with me. And I said, oh, that's very exciting. I guess they had seen some of my earlier work and they were excited about it. And so so I said, yeah, sure, let's try it. And I hadn't really given too much of a thought to doing something like that before, but then I spent a lot of time with the producers at that production company, talking about, you know, so many of my favorite science shows over the years. You know, there's just so many of them, you know, like Cosmos, and like there was an old BBC show called Connections. Or there are a whole bunch that I just really loved. And we would talk about those and kind of what was the fun parts of them, and what were the things that I think I could do differently, or things I could bring. And their specialty was really, they had this idea that it would be fun, because you think of a science show and you think of kind of like old school Bill Nye, the Science Guy, where he's in a kind of a studio lab and he's like doing sort of fun, gimmicky kind of like experiments, like on a, or maybe in a field or something. But the idea that they had was, what if we made a science travel show where you go all over the world and you see scientists kind of in their natural habitat, so to speak, or like in the field, like actually doing the things that they do, like trying to study, if they're studying sewage, we're going out into the sewers with them, like that kind of thing. And and that was very exciting to me, and the opportunity to travel, it's very pre-COVID, the opportunity to just travel around the world, and then also the idea that that I could like go and actually watch some of these very dramatic, exciting things happen. And then kind of as we developed the idea, one of the ideas we kind of had after that was, okay, if we're going to these places that are kind of far away from where our viewers actually are, what's the way we can connect it back to them? What's the way that even if I'm telling you about something that's happening in the middle of the Sahara Desert where nobody's around, why is it that somehow should matter to you, to you watching it on your couch, even though you've never been to the Sahara Desert or didn't really care about the Sahara Desert or don't think about the Sahara Desert in your daily life? Why would this matter to you? So then that kind of became the game. Like, what's the furthest kind of place we could go? And then what's the way we could make it relevant or connect it back to just an ordinary person, like you or me watching at home.
That's wonderful. So maybe I'm curious to ask you, Latif, since you have been in radio for many years and this TV show, do you think it was a challenge for you? Because I think when you have this intimate conversation or in the radio or the podcast, and sometimes the audience can imagine something different. But when it comes to V, how do you see it? Was it challenging for you? Did you really enjoy it? It was enjoyable, of course, but for you as Latif, do you think it was comfortable for you to do that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, like it was definitely not comfortable. Isn't the word I would use, because I was doing a new thing. I was trying a new thing, and I certainly failed a number of times. Like, and like it was very difficult because, like, okay, so like imagine right now we're having this conversation, right? And this is usually for me, like when I'm doing my podcast interviews and stuff, like this is how I do it, right? Like it's like I get to have a long, at least an hour, maybe 90 minutes, maybe like a long conversation, very conversational, fun, informal, like you can kind of do it. And even now, especially, you can do it in your own home. It's really, it's really simple, it's like, and it's for most people, it's just like talking on the phone, basically. Whereas in TV, it's sort of a different game altogether. So imagine like I would have to fly to a place and maybe the researcher wasn't there. So researcher had to fly to that place. Then we go and we're meeting for the first time. And then we only have, because the camera people have to set up the shot, so you're awkwardly standing there. And then what we realize is, okay, we're going to start the interview, but before we start the interview, they tell me, look, the sun is over there, so we have the right lighting, but we're only going to have it for 15 minutes, so go. And then you have to do the full interview in 15 minutes, and also they have to film it from both angles. So you might have to repeat a question here and then repeat it there. And then also, these are scientists, a lot of them, so they're not used to being on camera. And they're kind of uncomfortable and self-conscious because of course they should be. This is, a lot of people are going to see this. So they take a little while to warm up and feel comfortable, but we only have 15 minutes and I'm trying to ask questions really rapid fire because I have so many things I want to cover. And tomorrow we're all flying all different places. So it's a very different way of interviewing people, of talking to people, of getting information. It was exciting though. It's fun. There are, other things that you don't get in radio, like to be able to see the person's face light up when they're talking about the thing that they think is so fascinating, or that they, this subject that they've fallen in love with. But there's certainly, it's just trade-offs, each medium I think has its strengths, has its weaknesses. And for me, kind of jumping into the medium that was new for me of TV, I was really kind of figuring it out as I was going along.
Yeah, I'm curious to ask you in this journey traveling in many places, how you can figure out, or maybe how you can find the science in tiny places, or maybe you never heard about them. How this process goes? Because sometimes it happens you have a guest and maybe it doesn't work. But how you make sure these people in these places they are the right fit for the show? Because in the
Yeah.
industry you want to make successful, and that's also maybe tricky. I'm not sure how it works, but I'm curious how you can find these signs, how you make sure they are fit for the show. Do you think you have ever excluded certain parts? It doesn't fit the story in your
Yeah.
show?
Yeah, we have like, and not because they weren't good, but we have definitely not include, we have cut interviews that I did, maybe
Mhm.
because usually because they just didn't fit in the, like when we were editing it, for some reason they didn't, from some reason or another, they didn't fit. But basically the job of making sure that the people I talk to are sort of right, that they can kind of, that they won't, that they know the subject matter, that they won't freeze up in front of the camera, that they'll sort of feel comfortable enough to, make jokes and talk
Yeah.
casually. So that job, actually, I did not do that job. That job, so I was very lucky to have a very excellent team of producers. I'll just say their names really quick. There was Gretchen and Jay and Caroline
Yeah.
and Mona, and they were all working on the different they would do, basically they would pre-interview. So before my actual on camera interview, they would call up that person and they would say, okay, what they would, do a much longer interview with them. They would figure out, what they knew about the topic, what kind of, like how, their style and manner of talking, and whether that would be suitable for the documentary. They would also look to say, oh, okay, like how can we, what does your research actually look like? What is your average day like? What would be the most interesting and visual place for us to interview you? And how would this work? And how would that work? And what do you think is the thing that people get wrong about your field that you would love to kind of correct? Like, so they were very, very good. And often they would do all of that kind of homework in a way, and then they would keep most of it from me so that I would be surprised, genuinely surprised when I interviewed these people. Um,
Mhm.
so usually the way it would work is I, or sometimes they, would kind of find a story, and and we would get excited about it, and we would sort of structure the whole episode, and then it would be like, okay, now it's time for casting. Now we have to find the right people, and it was, yeah, it was tricky, but I was so lucky that they, I mean, and the proof is in the series. I think we got so many just talkers, scientists who are talking about their science, will make you cry or make you gasp or make you, laugh, just because they were just excellent. I was so happy to be able to talk to all of the
Yeah.
people that I talked to.
Wonderful. Maybe I'm curious to ask you why you hate listening to yourself or seeing yourself. And that's interesting, because first of all, as I mentioned, there's a consensus about you, and it's really weird to find the criticism about you, just one or two. Most of the comments just really good, and that's really great.
Oh,
But
thank you.
why you hate? Actually, I hate listening to myself and
Oh,
seeing.
yes. So I think you understand. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm curious. You are more experienced, of course, but I'm curious why you have this feeling and you have a lot of success, and why
I
is it
think,
something?
yeah, there's something, I think there's something about, I feel like I've read and heard before, it's like like hearing your own voice, because when you actually hear your voice, I'm gonna butcher this, but it's like it's resonating through your skull, right? You actually literally hear it in a different way than
Mhm.
you hear other people's voices.
Yeah.
And then when you hear your voice recorded and played back to you, as if you hear other people's voices, your voice sounds different to you, and I think in a eerie way that you don't like. But I think more than that, besides just the kind of knee jerk, I just don't want to. It feels very self-involved and weird to watch yourself. The the thing that I think, one of the other reasons, is because it's funny, whenever I make something, anything I make, whether it's an article or a podcast or a TV episode, for me, I feel like I can see the seams, like I can see all the choices that we made. And not just like to say, okay, oh, I wrote that line of dialogue, so I know what I said, but you know what? I should have done that differently. Like I should have done that differently. I should have done that differently. And not only that, oh, I could have tweaked the wording here, or I could have cut this part, or I could have added that part. To me, it's also like, I also, because I was in the genesis of the project, I know what choices we didn't make, right? Like I know what we left on the table, what else was said in that interview that we maybe could have, should have used instead, or what we, like there's so much of it is just like me second guessing myself, which maybe I should or shouldn't do, but I'm just I'm very critical of myself, and I can see all of those sort of things where it's like, oh yeah, that was good, but it might have been better if we did that, or oh, we could have actually, maybe I should have flipped the order of these two segments, or maybe we should have done this or that or the other thing. And I mean, I stand behind and feel good about everything I've put out into the world, but still, there's a kind of a relentless self-criticism where you just want it to be better, you always, and it always can be better.
Yeah. That's great. And I don't know if you have ever received like criticism from science about the show. Is this something that's like maybe a rare situation, but I don't know if you have received.
Yeah, no, I have. I've definitely received different kinds of criticism. For example, I think one a very good and a right criticism that I entirely understand. Is for example, one of the episodes is about a kind of a mathematical a principle called Benford's law, and some of the criticism I got, and this is criticism I actively sought out from my friends who are mathematicians and stuff. Some of the criticisms I got were, you made a great episode, but you actually don't explain it enough. This thing that you spend this 45 minutes talking about how many ways to apply it and you don't explain why it happens enough. You could explain it more, and you could explain it more using math. And that's true, I could. And in fact, we kind of made a choice at some point to not do that, to not go further in depth into the actual math, to kind of say, okay, look, here is why mathematically this makes sense. And that's because I think math is something that puts a lot of people off. Math is something that a lot of people, that's not the first thing they want to watch when they're on Netflix. In fact, it's probably close to the last thing they want to watch on Netflix. And to me, the point is, okay, hopefully, and I see this about everything I do, like it's just an invitation. It's like, oh, here, let me tell you a little bit about this thing, just enough that you can get excited yourself, and you can go out and look up more and read more and understand more yourself, and kind of to empower you to do that, and to give you kind of just a taste. And so for me, that's the kind of, it's true, I could have done better, I could have done more. Me and the team that I made this with, but we kind of made the decision we made on purpose, and we did it the way we did it because I think math is it's a hard sell for a lot of people, and in a way we did it sort of the way we thought would appeal to a lot of people, and especially people who would generally, the math would be the last thing they'd opt to watch, with their free time on Netflix,
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I think that, I think the most tricky part, and even science, how we can grasp the attention of audience.
Right.
And I think math in that case will make them turn it off. So I think
right.
That's really maybe the most trickiest, and maybe that's an academy we fail to do that. How we can make things sound interesting, and so yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I can understand why. Yeah, why it could be challenging. Yeah.